7.1. Ian thought Amy had gone out for the evening and sat down to wait for her to come back. Tired after his long journey, he fell asleep. When he woke up, the phone was ringing. Ian answered the phone. It was Amy.
I said, "Where are you?" She said, "Ian, I'm sitting in your flat in Australia." At first I didn't believe her, but then she gave the phone to Eddie, who lives in my flat in Sydney, and he told me it was true. I was so shocked I couldn't speak.
Amy had had the same idea as Ian. She had flown from London to Sydney via Singapore at exactly the same time Ian was flying in the opposite direction. Incredibly, both their planes stopped in Singapore at the same time. Ian and Amy were sitting in the same airport lounge, but they didn't see each other.
I had saved all my money to buy a ticket to Sydney. I wanted it to be a fantastic surprise for Ian. I couldn't wait to see his face when I arrived. You can't imagine how I felt when I arrived at his flat and his friend Eddie told me he'd gone to England. I just couldn't believe it. When I spoke to Ian on the phone, he told me that he had flown back to England for a special reason. And then he asked me to marry him. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but I said yes.
It was just bad luck. If one of us had stayed at home, we would have met. It's as simple as that.
7.2. The cabin crew put out a desperate call to the passengers. "If there's a doctor on the plane, could you please press your call bell?" The cabin crew were hoping to hear this. But they didn't. They heard this. Incredibly, there were 15 doctors on the plane, and all of them were cardiologists. They were from different countries, and they were travelling to Florida for a medical conference. 4 of the doctors rushed to give emergency treatment to Mrs. Fletcher. At one point they thought she had died, but finally they managed to save her life. The plane made an emergency landing in North Carolina, and Mrs. Fletcher was taken to hospital. After being in hospital for 4 days, she was able to go to her daughter's wedding.
I was very lucky. If those doctors hadn't been on the plane, I would have died. I can't thank them enough.
But now that she's back in England, Mrs. Fletcher has been less lucky with British hospitals.
I had 15 heart specialists on that plane, but I'll have to wait 3 months until I can see one in this country.
7.3.
If one of us had stayed at home, we would have met.
If those doctors hadn't been on the plane, I would have died.
7.4. 1.
If you'd told me earlier, I would have gone too.
2.
If the weather had been better, we would have stayed longer.
3.
If I hadn't stopped for petrol, I would have arrived before he left.
4.
We would have been late if we hadn't taken a taxi.
5.
She wouldn't have come if she'd known he was here.
6.
It would have been cheaper if we'd booked last month.
7.5. Song. Ironic.
An old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day. It's a black fly in your Chardonnay. It's a death row pardon, 2 minutes too late. And isn't it ironic? Don't you think? It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride when you've already paid. It's the good advice that you just did. on your cigarette break. It's like 10,000 spoons when all you need is a knife. It's meeting the man of my dreams and then meeting his beautiful wife. And isn't it ironic, don't you think? A little too ironic. Yeah, I really do think. It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride when you've already paid. It's the good advice that you just didn't take. And who'd have thought it bigger? Well, life is a funny way of sneaking up on you. And life is a funny, funny way of helping you out. Helping you out.
Seven 7.6.
Good morning, and thank you for coming, Mr. Morton. Or should it be Inspector Morton? You were a detective with Scotland Yard, weren't you?
Yes, that's right. For 25 years. I retired last year.
People today are still fascinated by the identity of Jack the Ripper, more than 100 years after the crimes were committed. It's incredible, isn't it?
Well, it's not really that surprising. People are always interested in unsolved murders, and Jack the Ripper has become a sort of cult horror figure.
Who are the main suspects?
Well, there are a lot of them, but probably the best known are Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's grandson, the artist Walter Sickert, and a Liverpool cotton merchant called James Maybrick.
Patricia Cornwell, in her book Jack the Ripper, Case Closed, says that she has identified the murderer. Who does she think it was?
Well, she's convinced that Jack the Ripper was Walter Sickert, the painter.
7.7.
What evidence did she discover?
Well, she mainly used DNA analysis. She actually bought a painting by Sickert at great expense, and she cut it up to get the DNA from it. Wow. People in the art world were furious.
I can imagine.
And then she compared the DNA from the painting with DNA taken from the letters that Jack the Ripper sent to the police. Patricia Cornwell says that she's 99% certain that Walter Sickert was Jack the Ripper.
But you don't think she's right, do you?
No, I don't. I don't think her scientific evidence is completely reliable, and there's a lot of evidence which says that Sickert was in France, not London, when some of the women were killed.
There's been another recent theory, hasn't there, about James Maybrick. Do you think he was the murderer?
Well, somebody found a diary which is supposed to be his, where he admits to being Jack the Ripper, but nobody has been able to prove that the diary is genuine, and personally I don't think he was the murderer.
And Prince Albert, the Queen's grandson?
Oh, this for me is the most ridiculous theory. I can't seriously believe that a member of the royal family could be a serial murderer. In any case, Prince Albert was in Scotland when at least 2 of the murders were committed.
So, who do you think the murderer was?
I can't tell you because I don't know.
So, you don't think we'll ever solve the mystery?
No, I wouldn't say that. I think one day the mystery will be solved. Some new evidence will appear, and we'll be able to say that the case of Jack the Ripper is finally closed, but at the moment it's still a mystery, and people like a good mystery.
7.8. 1.
You were a detective with Scotland Yard, weren't you?
2.
It's incredible, isn't it?
3.
But you don't think she's right, do you?
4.
There's been another recent theory, hasn't there?
7.9.
Your surname's Jones, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you're 27, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
You weren't at home last night at 8 o'clock, were you?
No, I wasn't. I was at the pub.
But you don't have any witnesses, do you?
Yes, I do. My brother was with me.
Your brother wasn't with you, was he?
How do you know?
Because he was at the police station. We arrested him last night.
7.10. 1.
Your surname's Jones, isn't it?
2.
And you're 27, aren't you?
3.
You weren't at home last night at 8 o'clock, were you?
4.
But you don't have any witnesses, do you?
5.
Your brother wasn't with you, was he?
7.11. I'd like to ask you some questions about your personal life, Signora. Our personal life? She repeated, as though she had never heard of such a thing. When he didn't answer this, she nodded, signalling him to begin. Could you tell me how long you and your husband were married? 19 years. How many children do you have, Signora? 2. Claudio is 17 and Francesca is 15. Are they in school in Venice, Signora? She looked up at him sharply when he asked this. Why do you want to know that? My own daughter, Chiara, is 14, so perhaps they know one another, he answered, and smiled to show what an innocent question it had been. Claudio is in school in Switzerland, but Francesca is here, with us. I mean, she corrected, rubbing her hand across her forehead, with me. Would you say yours was a happy marriage, Signora? Yes, she answered immediately, far faster than Brunetti would have answered the same question, though he would have given the same response. She did not, however, elaborate. Could you tell me if your husband had any particularly close friends or business associates? She looked up at this question, then as quickly down again at her hands. Our closest friends are the Nogares, Mirto and Graziella. He's an architect who lives in Campo Sant'Angelo. They're Francesca's godparents. I don't know about business associates. You'll have to ask Ubaldo. Other friends, Signora? Why do you need to know all this? She said, voice rising sharply. I'd like to learn more about your husband, Signora. Why? The question leapt from her, almost as if beyond her volition. Until I understand what sort of man he was, I can't understand why this has happened. A robbery? She asked, voice just short of sarcasm. It wasn't robbery, Signora. Whoever killed him intended to do it. (7.12) 1.
How much does it cost?
Could you tell me how much it costs?
2.
Is there a bank near here?
Do you know if there's a bank near here?
3.
What time does the next train leave?
Could you tell me what time the next train leaves?
4.
Does the museum open on Saturdays?
Can you tell me if the museum opens on Saturdays?
5.
Where's the bus station?
Can you tell me where the bus station is?
6.
Does this bus go to the beach?
Do you know if this bus goes to the beach?
7.13.
Detective novel. Horror film. Murder mystery. Police inspector. Crime writer. Police station.
7.14. 1.
We can't go. They've sold out.
2.
I'd like to find out about train times.
3.
I'm looking forward to August.
4.
I was talking to my mother, but we were cut off.
5.
In future, remember to switch off the kitchen lights.
6.
Philip's not old enough to look after a 5-year-old.
7.
We put on our seatbelts before the flight took off.
8.
They don't get on with each other.
7.15. 1.
There's a towel on the floor. Pick it up.
2.
I hate this music. Switch it off.
3.
Your jacket's on the chair. Put it away.
4.
You don't need a coat. Take it off.
5.
I can't hear the TV. Turn it up.
6.
Coffee's bad for you. Give it up.
7.16.
Well, it wouldn't be electric light because I love candles, and I could live without a washing machine for a week. I often do when I'm on holiday. I think I would miss a fridge, though. I'd hate not to have cold drinks, and it would mean having to go shopping every day for food, or it would go off. So a fridge would be one thing, and then probably my laptop. It has a battery, but I could only use it for 3 hours or so without charging it, so I wouldn't be able to do much work.
Well, it depends. I'd quite miss the TV, but I suppose I could live without it for a week if I had to. And what else? Oh no, my mobile. I wouldn't be able to charge it. I couldn't live without my mobile. I mean, that's how I keep in touch with all my friends. And my MP3 player. I need my music. Yes, definitely those two.
I think for me, it would have to be first and foremost the dishwasher. Because with the family and so much washing up, I would just be over the sink forever. It would be a nightmare for me to have no dishwasher, and I've got so used to it. So that would be the first thing, and the second thing probably, again, because of having a family, a young family, would be an iron. Because there's so much ironing, and if I had to go without that, everyone would look terrible. Nobody would look very smart, so those would be my two things.
Well, I suppose the first thing I'd miss most would be my mobile phone, because I couldn't charge it up, so I couldn't use it, and I'd get very upset about that. There are some people's numbers that are only stored in the phone. I haven't got them written down, and I wouldn't be able to get in touch with those people. So mobile phone, and the other thing I'd miss would be electricity. If the electricity had gone, would be the lights. At this time of year, especially when the days are short, the mornings are dark, early afternoon, late afternoon's dark too. I miss lights as well. So mobile phone and lights.
7.17.
Mark Ryder.
Mark, can you come in?
Sure.
Thanks for the sales report.
I think there's something more important to talk about right now.
What do you mean?
That message you sent me? You hit reply to all. You sent it to everyone in the office.
Oh, no, you're joking. Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I did it without thinking.
It's all right, Allie. It's an easy mistake to make.
How could I be so stupid? I just wasn't concentrating.
Allie.
I'm really sorry.
Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. But I think we should talk to the others.
Yes, you're right. I'll do it. It was my fault. Listen, everybody, I just want to say that I'm terribly sorry. I haven't been honest with you. Mark and I...
That's okay, Ali. We had already guessed. It wasn't really a surprise.
7.18.
I'm so sorry. I did it without thinking.
It's all right, Allie.
How could I be so stupid? I just wasn't concentrating. I'm really sorry.
Don't worry about it. It doesn't matter.
It was my fault. I'm terribly sorry.
7.19.
I still can't work out how they knew about us. I was always really careful not to treat you differently.
You were really hard on me.
Mark, I wasn't.
Oh, you were just being fair and very British.
So if it wasn't me, it must have been you.
What?
I've got my own office. You're with them all the time. You must have said something. You're hopeless at keeping secrets.
Don't blame me. This wasn't my fault. They probably just guessed.
How?
You know the French. They're experts on love affairs.
Maybe.
Actually, I think it's great that everyone knows. Now we don't have to pretend anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
Allie, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for a long time. I just haven't said anything. But it's now or never. Allie, will you...
Sorry, Mark. I didn't hear a word you said.
I said, will you marry me? Was that a yes?
Yes!
Can you confirm that in an email for me? Just don't send it to everyone in the office this time.
7.20.
So if it wasn't me, it must have been you. You're hopeless at keeping secrets.
Don't blame me. But it's now or never.
I didn't hear a word you said.
Can you confirm that in an email?
7.21. 1.
So then I spoke to the manager. Hey, my computer's not working.
The electricity's just gone off. It'll come back on in a minute.
Oh, no. I don't know if I've saved the article I was writing.
Doesn't it save automatically?
Yes, but only every half hour. Oh, it's back on again. Now we'll see. Yes, thank goodness it's all there. Oh, if I hadn't saved it, I would have had to look up all that information again.
You were lucky. So, tell me what the manager said.
2.
Why do you always wear that yellow T-shirt when you play?
It's my lucky shirt. I put it on under my football shirt.
Do you really believe it brings you luck?
Well, I suppose it's just superstition, really. But the one time I wasn't wearing it, we lost.
Why weren't you wearing it?
Because I'd left it out the night before in my chair, but my wife thought it looked dirty and put it in the washing machine.
3.
What are you reading?
The Minotaur by Barbara Vine.
She's a detective writer, isn't she?
Yeah, she's brilliant.
You're always reading detective novels. Don't you ever read anything else?
Of course I do. I read lots of classics and science fiction too. It's just that when I'm on a train or a bus, I need something light. And anything's better than reading the sports papers like you do. Anyway, shut up now and let me read. I'm just about to find out who the murderer is.
4.
OK, now I'm going to ask you a few questions, and just so that you know, this interview will be recorded. This is Detective Inspector David Hawkins interviewing Gerald Carter on Thursday, May the 20th. OK. Let's start with what you were doing last night.
I was at home.
Any witnesses?
My mum. She was there. You can ask her if you like.
So you didn't go out at all?
No. I stayed in and watched TV. Well, I went to the corner shop to get some milk, but that was just 5 minutes.
Did you watch anything in particular? On TV?
Yeah, the football. England and Denmark. Rubbish match.
So you weren't anywhere near the pub? The King's Head?
The pub? Me? No way.
So you'd be surprised to hear that 3 people saw you there?
They're lying. And I'm not going to answer any more of your questions without a lawyer.
5.
Could you turn the TV off, please?
But, Mum, it hasn't finished yet.
What hasn't finished?
The film. It's Star Wars, The Return of the Jedi.
But you've seen it before, I know you have.
Yes, but it's so good. And it's nearly finished, I promise. Just 5 more minutes.
I don't care. It's 10 o'clock and it's time to go to bed. It's already half an hour past your normal bedtime.
But yesterday you said we could watch it if we'd finished our homework.
Yes, but I didn't know it was on so late. Bedtime, and that's that.
7.22.
And finally, tonight's TV. A word about what's on television this evening. At 8 p.m. on BBC Two, you can see Eight-Legged Wonders, a documentary about those fascinating insects, arachnids, I should say, spiders. It's a must for anyone who's interested in nature and wildlife. However, if you suffer from arachnophobia, you'd be better off watching ITV, as at the same time as Eight-Legged Wonders, there's the first episode of a new crime series called The Silent Detective, starring Amanda Hobbs. Then, after that, on ITV, at 9:15, there's this week's edition of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Note that the time has changed for this quiz show, as it used to be on at 9:30. On BBC One a bit later, at 10:05, the film in the All-Time Greats series is the wonderful Ingmar Bergman film Fanny and Alexander, so if you're a fan of European cinema, don't miss it. And finally, a change of programme on ITV. Instead of tonight's episode of Hospital Life, at 10:30, as a tribute to the late John Miller, ITV will be screening his Oscar-winning film Happy Days. So, if you're waiting to find out what's going to happen to Dr. Hammond and Nurse Marshall, you'll have to wait till next week. And now it's over to the news desk for the latest update on...